Welcome to the pRoGgReSiVe podcast, where I talk about gender identity ideology and other bad ideas, women's rights and free speech from a European point of view. All right, so David Allison, which is your real name, welcome to pRoGgReSiVe. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to me. So this is the second time that I've done this. And to repeat what I said the last time, the reason I'm making these recordings is because I want to try and give a little bit of the international context, particularly in Europe, of what's going on with gender identity or gender self-ID in particular, but also just a general institutional gender capture that's happening in all the different countries, because as you know, there are some real strong similarities between countries, and then there are some regional differences, and I think those are interesting, and I've found that people are quite interested in hearing about them. So thanks for joining me. The last time I spoke to somebody from my friend Dana from Slovakia, and today I'm talking to David Allison, who is British but based in Germany. David, do you remember how we met?
Yeah, hi Róisín. Yeah, we met in Vienna last year. Yeah.
Yep. Where were we? Pub. I think it was interesting. In the pub, yeah, of course. Actually, we hung out in the pub afterwards, but we had already met because I approached you because it was in the park with Kelly J. Keane, and it was Let Women Speak Vienna.
Yeah.
And do you remember I came up to you and your wife?
Yeah.
Because I think I was like, oh, there's two people who are potentially peakable, but then I was like, oh no, these two people are extremely peaked. That's what. And you told me a really funny story in the pub afterwards, and we're going to get into that in a while. But maybe you could tell me a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Yeah, right. About myself. Well, as you said, I'm British, but I've been in Germany, living in Germany for like over 30 years, and I'm a German citizen. Let's come on to how I got involved in this issue at all. But I've been politically active for many, many years, and I was a member of the German Green Party for about 15 years, and previous to that, when I was still living in the UK, I was a member of the Labour Party. So yeah, that's I'm politically active person. I don't know, but at the moment, I'm not a member of the Green Party anymore. At the moment, I am the spokesperson for a parents' an initiative of critical parents who have trans-identifying children children, and who are very critical about the whole trans ideology, if we can put it that way.
You don't have a trans-identifying child yourself?
I don't. No, I don't. I mean, maybe we'll get onto why I was contacted. The main thing about that is that it's very difficult. I mean, some parents do manage to speak in public, but most critical parents are saying that they don't want to appear with their own name in public because because of the great risk that it will exacerbate the conflicts that they already have with their children. So, I mean, the people who I'm working with just don't want their children to know that they are kind of actually sort of activists in a way.
So, I remember, sorry, just on that point, that's absolutely true. The first time I realized this was, again, at another Kelly J. Keane event, Let Women Speak, I think it was in Glasgow. And I met this woman, and she told me about her daughter, typical story, young, autistic, potentially lesbian, suddenly, gets completely captured online by this whole ideology. And I said to the woman, and would you not just go to the Daily Mail and tell them the whole story and basta, And she looked at me like I was a moron. And she was like, what do you think that would do to my relationship with my daughter if I were to do something like that? And I was like, oh, yeah. And yeah, of course, we then, as I was saying to you before, we have this group Róisín where it's also kind of a parents group, among other things. And I've had conversations with women who've had to go get in their cars, drive to a lay-by and speak on the whispers in their phone, like just out of terror, So anyway, I understand why the parents themselves might not want to be a spokesperson. So what were you saying there then? Your work with the organization, for context, are there many organizations like that in Germany, or is yours the only one?
No, there are not. There is a well-organized and well-funded trans supportive parents group. But on the critical side, no. What we've got is there is actually two groups. One is called Parents of ROGD Children. I think it's, it's actually got an English name, and that's a large group of parents. It's a more of a self. What's it called? Sometimes I forget my English words. It's a support group where people come together and help each other. It's a very large group, and then our group is a kind of an offshoot of that, smaller group, and its mission is to work, to do public relations, to talk to politics, to lobby, to get the ideas out there. It's not a support group for the parents. It's a group that talks to the outside world. And we have a website which I can really recommend to German speakers. It's excellent. We've got people who are producing really excellent material, very really based and scientifically good stuff. So we do that. We lobby politicians. We've written statements about the new proposed self-ID law. We were actually quoted recently, a few weeks ago. You can read about that in Bernard Lane's Gender Clinic News. I don't know if you know that, because I
Very good. No, what's the name of your org? Remind me.
Our organization is called Trans Teens quota'd. That's a bit difficult. I could write it down, but that basically means now I can't explain it right now, but there's maybe you can send it, you can write it down.
But the gist basically is there's one group that's for support for parents, and then there's an offshoot of that that's more public facing, and it's advocacy.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I have been occasionally invited, and I feel very honored to do that, to go to these support meetings. But, but the aim is, because, as I said, people want me to talk for them. At least that's how it is at the moment. And I've accepted this role. And sometimes it's just quite good to hear more parents' stories, so that I got a better idea of, what's the issues that they're confronting and how I can best represent them.
Yeah, and how, sorry if this has gone off on a bit of a tangent, but do you find that the stories are very similar to each other, or do you, is it very typical trajectory?
Well, actually, what I did think when I've been to these is it's just how striking how different all these stories are in some respects. Right. Okay. So people are just very, very different. And I found even that but out of that, I would draw, sort of come to the conclusion that the whole label trans is just ridiculously simplistic to describe the kind of personal development issues that, these young people are confronting. There are, of course, there's common ground, of course. What you will find is, perhaps that's too subtle, this analysis, because what they do have in common is that if a young person comes out as trans to their parents, the parents almost inevitably experience that all the institutions with which they have to do, social services and so on, are very affirming, particularly here in Germany, and the parents feel totally left alone and under extreme pressure to go along with stuff. That is something which really applies right across the board, almost entirely. I'd say, 95% of the case people will say this is how it is. Occasionally you will find a social worker who maybe thinks a little bit differently, but that's the experience. But talking about the individuals themselves, and I was kind of surprised just how different they are. The people. And
so it's male and female, everything. Okay, all kinds of backgrounds, I guess. I often
with people from foreign, with migration, what we call here the migration backgrounds, loads of people like that. But a lot of people who are parents who think they say that they're liberal left, they've voted Green in the past. There are some parents who are pretty conservative, you know. I mean, there's some religious ones. They're it's a totally mixed bag. It's really a cross-section of society, you know.
And when you said trans is so simplistic, it really is. The more you know about this topic, the more you realize that all kinds of things have been mushed together under this one label, and it would be so difficult to sit down and try and figure out like a categories or taxonomy that would sort of, you know, because it's in multiple different problems that need to be tackled individually. And the obviously the activists, the last thing they want you to do is find the differences. They want us to think that it's all working and it's human rights, and that's the end of the story.
You know, Dr.
So great.
You know, Dr. Az Hakim's book, Az Hakim.
I haven't read it, but I have read bits of it, and I've enjoyed it. Yeah, I see a lot.
I mean, that's his main perspective. You know, that this is a whole bunch of different conditions, and you know, that trans is just a completely
political. It's a political term.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the specificities of Germany before we go into the current state of affairs. What's the current situation for, let's imagine, an adult male who believes he's a woman and wants to get his gender recognition certificate? Is there an equivalent to a gender recognition certificate in Germany like there is in the UK and Ireland? And what are the conditions for getting one currently?
Right, that's a good question. There is actually something called, there's something called the Transsexuellen Gesetz, which is from I think it's from 1980 or the early 1980s, right? So that would actually certainly predates the Gender Recognition Act. I think.
Because the UK were quite late in the game, weren't they? You had all sorts of options in the Nordic countries and in Germany. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this act is still in force now. What happened was, over the years, the law has been found to be by the Constitutional Court. Cases have been taken to the Constitutional Court, which found that various aspects of this law were said to be non-constitutional, and particularly, for example, this law from 1980, let's say, required, in order to get the certificate, you had to divorce if you were married, because at that time, obviously, there was no same-sex marriage, so that would have been, so that was one requirement. Another requirement was that you had to have medical, you had to transition somehow medically in some form.
So hold on, my guinea pig is drinking from his water thing and it's making loads of noise in the background. I'm just going to go take it off him just a sec.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start again. So you were saying that the current law as it stands was said to be unconstitutional because this is the same in Ireland, it's the same everywhere. It requires divorce, requires surgery. What else did it require?
I think it requires sterilization, although that might have been the consequence.
That's the surgery. This is the bait and switch. Sorry to interrupt you, but this pisses me off so much because the idea was the cases that were brought to the European Court all those decades ago were like, look, what's the problem with granting these men these certificates or these women these certificates? After all, they're not going to have any heritage problems. What do you call them? We're not going to have any issues with claims, their children's claims to inheritance or whatever the other issues might be, and they're not going to wreck any families because they're not actually going to be able to have kids because they all have the gender surgery. So that was the basis upon which all these rights were granted. And then they turn around and they rebrand this, I'm going to have gender surgery so there won't be any succession problems, that's the word. And they rebranded forced sterilization for political reasons. So it really pisses me off. So yes, the sterilization requirement, the forced sterilization requirement is a rebranding of I will have gender surgery. So that's how you know I'm legit. Sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah. Anyway, I mean, these are the details, but it was, the law was considered to be in part not compatible with the Constitution. So the government.
What year was that claim made?
Well, there were several cases taken to the Constitutional Court, and I can't tell you exactly, I would have to look it up, but that was over a period of years, okay? So the pressure was building on the governments throughout this time to reform this law. And basically everybody kind of recognized that because of the Constitutional Court decisions, something would have to give somewhere. And because this is now the main argument which is used politically for self-ID, is simply to say that the old law was not constitutional. But actually what has in fact happened is that firstly, we now have same-sex marriage, so that thing no longer applies. And secondly, in practice, nobody is actually required to undertake surgery anyway. So the things that the Constitutional Court said were not acceptable are in practice not applied anyway. But that's not really what the argument is about. So they're using this ploy to say this is not constitutional, to get rid of the other elements of the law, which are most importantly the requirement to have an assessment, a psychological assessment by two experts, and so on and so forth. So this kind of let's call it gatekeeping, it is in a way, or checks or assessments. So they use
safeguards, we might say.
Yeah, safeguards. Okay, great. Yeah. So they're using the anti-constitutional argument simply to argue that the law is in its entirety needs to go. Although, in fact, the Constitutional Court has said in other cases that there is nothing anti-constitutional about having assessments, and in fact that the state has a real interest in ensuring that sex identities are stable and unambiguous. So, but
there's something I don't understand, David, though. You were saying that in the law, the original transsexual law, there is a clause that requires gender reassignment, but when you say it's not required in practice, you mean there's no test to make sure you've undergone it?
I'm not sure, but yeah, no, I don't actually know how that is in practice. That's right, but I know that is not. Everybody knows that is not
enforced.
In reality, not a requirement. You don't. Maybe it's been quietly dropped. I'm not sure, but
okay.
No, actually, sorry. I mean, no. Well, of course. I mean, it would have been dropped because the Constitutional Court said it was not constitutional. I mean,
okay, so they did manage to undo some of the original old school law anyway.
So that's right. So these provisions have been, are not applicable anymore. But what happened? But they were still in the original law. They were just no longer being applied. So there was some pressure to there's a technical term for it, to sort of clean up the law, to bring it up to date, right? To get rid of these formally,
like
to get
rid of these review
elements, take these elements out. But it's been used at the same time to push for much more extensive, much more radical changes, i.e. self-ID.
And are you very familiar with the draft text or the proposed self-ID text? Like, does it go further than, let's say, the most liberal ones? I think Argentina is the most liberal one, where not only can you pay, you can get free sex reassignment surgery on national health care or whatever, but also I think, maybe I'm mistaken though, but being able to change your legal sex as many times as you want in your life, does it contain like really banana stuff like that, or is it tame in comparison?
Yeah, it does. No, it does contain banana stuff. Well done. It does. Right, where should I start? First of all, it allows parents to change the sex of their child from birth, right? So, I mean, there has actually been a case in Germany where somebody tried to do this anyway. That is, I don't know which sex it was, but a male child, just born, and parents wanted it to be a girl. The court turned it down, obviously. So, I mean, that's probably pretty exotic. But that would actually now be possible if this law comes through, or when it comes through. It will allow you to change sex in an indefinite number of times. Yeah, I mean, there is, I think you're probably, if I remember correctly, I think there's going to be a year, you know, you'd
15
have to do
months, no?
something like that. You'd have to do it, I think for 12 months you have to do it.
Yeah.
And then you could change back. So, which is kind of absurd, because then what does that mean about the whole idea of the reliability of a sense of identity? It makes no sense, right, at all. Even if you were a trans, you know, even if you believe in this stuff. But the big issue, so yeah, I mean, maybe let's explain the law. So parents can change the sex of their children from birth. From the age of 14, children and young people will be allowed to change their own sex entry in the, but they were still, this has been a hot, yeah, in the register, but this is really highly contested. This is a big battlefield. At the moment, according to the law as is supposed to come in, they would still require parental consent, although if parents don't give their consent, the child would be able to go to the court and override this. This is a you know, real battlefield, because the trans activists say it's not radical enough, and
Yeah.
right, so they want to give children and young people 100% power to just to change without any
From age 0.
parents' parental rights at all.
Jesus.
I mean, the big thing that's just, and the clever tactic here is that the government, and let's say the Green Party, it's mainly the Green Party, insists that this is merely to do with a legal change of name, and it doesn't have anything to do with medical transition, surgery, and so forth, because there is nothing about that in this new law. They've managed to separate the two things. So every time we, for example, say, well, if you allow a 14-year-old to socially transition and legally transition, then the pressure will increase from them and on them to go the medical route. They'll say, oh, no, this has got nothing to do with medicine. It's just a legal change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what they're doing is they're pursuing the medical pathway in a second, they're taking a second route there. So the coalition government is in fact committed to providing transition, surgery, whatever, medical measures free on the public health system.
Okay, so that's a separate lobbying effort.
That is definitely what they want. Okay, that's absolutely out in the open, but they've managed to separate it from this self-ID law, which is now going through Parliament, which is a clever political move. At the same time, I could tell quite a lot of stories about that. We managed to get onto some to workshops at the Ministry of Health, where they were talking about the medical issues and what they wanted to do in the future. And I can tell you, it's absolutely mind-blowingly extreme what the people at the health ministry are thinking about, which is basically to reduce, to eliminate, as in terms, it's all to do with, of course, who's going to pay for the stuff. That's it. So it's all about trying to get this treatment on public health, which is a problem because it's not compatible with the whole philosophy of pathologizing trans. Okay, so there's a conflict, a philosophical conflict there. But what they're trying to do, they're trying to repackage this as being like things like pregnancy, like contraceptives, help. That is areas
sexual
of life
health,
which are not to do with sickness, but where the medical services can play a role, right? So they want to put it into this box, but they also want to, and this is what I find quite really amazing, is they want to have no age limits for anything at all. An extensive, unbelievable extensive interventions, and it should all be free. Yeah, and I think this is going to be the second strand to the legislative initiatives here in Germany, but it's quite clever that they've managed so far to keep the two things separate. right?
In the minds of journalists and
absolutely,
normal
that's right.
people.
Because the argument is always, if we point out various, with respect to children and young people, for example, the argument is always, well, they're just going to change their name and they can always change it back again and it doesn't do any harm. So, you know,
it's so evil, isn't it? Like sometimes when I hear stuff like this, it's just I can't think of any other word for it. I'm not a religious person, but it just sounds, that's what evil sounds like, just awful. And this rebranding of as sexual and reproductive health and rights is just so pernicious as well. It's crazy. I was watching an old interview yesterday from one of the people who was really instrumental in getting all this stuff into UN technical agencies and then sort of forcing countries upon different countries. And she said quite openly all those years ago, though they would never say it openly now, like, we have a real dilemma, a catch-22. How do you depathologize it while still insisting it's a medical issue and get treatment free on it? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's particularly crazy. I mean, even sometimes you have to say, even if you were to adopt the trans perspective, it still looks crazy. It still looks crazy in a system in which it's, you know, everybody else has to pay additional, you know, fees, now charges to get even the simplest dental treatment, but they want to have everything, you know, from hair treatment, what's it called, epilation, I don't know, everything should be free. It's, and also they want to expand these services even into the more rural areas of Germany. I sort of live on the edge of a rural area, and, you know, it's just an extraordinary, you know, use of resources, I think, which of course
it's extreme body modification, and then trying to put it in the same category as getting pregnant is mind blowing. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, but did you want to talk about what's special about Germany and maybe where this law is at the moment? I don't know how it's happening, because
where is it now?
Well, there was a first reading in Parliament, in the German Bundestag, the German National Parliament, in autumn. I'm not very good at times, but it was sometime in last autumn. So the first reading, and then that was not very spectacular. The second reading was scheduled for mid-December, and then for some reason was cancelled. So we're now all wondering what's going on. Why is there no date for a second reading? Right. So
was this related to the sorry, I have to try and remember the details now, but at some point one of the ministers who had who was in communication with like the Chamber of Commerce or whatever, and they were saying, look, this is going to be bad for business because we're going to have to make all sorts of exceptions and allowances, and it might harm our ability to keep our businesses running. And then the minister called it off. Did I invent that, or did something like that happen last year?
Hang on, I'm not sure now. I'm not quite sure what you're getting at. There was some discussion about in Parliament and in the press as to what extent this self-ID law clashes with the equality law. You know, there's something similar in the UK.
And it was not to do with sauna owners came out.
Exactly. That was the showcase issue. Would this law, as it's currently drafted, would allow sauna owners to make autonomous decisions right at the door about who's allowed to come in or not. Okay, so they could, it would be argued theoretically, they could turn away a trans woman. But then we've got the people in the I'm trying to think of the English words, you know, like the equalities minister, right, who's a very woke woman, who's saying, no, that's not possible. That would be discrimination. That would definitely be discrimination if somebody were to be turned away at the door. So this debate went on. The government in the law were trying to actually avoid all these difficult areas. They say, for example, it's up to the sports clubs to make their own rules. It's up to the saunas to make their own rules. so they're trying to delegate all the obviously problematic areas to other people. And of course, they also try to avoid this medical issue. But at the same time, we've got other people in the government who are saying, well, the equality and the non-discrimination laws would prevent people from doing that. So this was a bit of chaotic, this discussion. Obviously, it doesn't make much sense. But then it just kind of all died down because it was going to come up for a second reading. But this second reading has not materialized, and not yet. And so there's speculation as to why that would be. I mean,
is that because they haven't resolved the issues that came up in the first reading? I mean, how did the activists respond to this clashes with the Equality Act discourse?
Well, that's the thing. The question is, we don't really know what's happening in the background. There's some indication that some members of the government, for example, maybe possibly among the Liberals, we've got this so-called traffic light government, right, between the Liberals, the Greens, and the Social Democrats. There's indication that some Liberals may be getting cold feet about the whole thing. And so maybe some of our criticism is having an effect. On the other hand, there is some indication that, in fact, the radicals, the trans radicals, and including people in the government, are actually saying the opposite. They're saying this law doesn't go far enough. We need to get rid of all these. We need to be very explicit and clear that there should be no, in inverted commas, no discrimination anywhere. And also they want to get rid of this rule which says that young people from the age of 14 still require parental consent. They're very, very unhappy about that. They want to get rid of that. So there is definitely a conflict within and outside the government, but we don't know who's got the upper hand or why this law is not coming
because
back into the second reading.
Yeah, there's so much of it is behind closed doors, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it's behind closed doors. And but I mean, one thing could be that shortly before Christmas we had this problem. The government had this problem with the budget because the budget was found to be not constitutional. So you could say, well, they had other problems to deal with, possibly, and this was just maybe in that moment not so important to the government. I don't know. Right.
So then it seems to have happened in Finland and the Netherlands that, the gender critical or the TERF side or the radfems felt like there was, it's not moving, and so hesitant to claim victory, and then bam, out of nowhere it just comes back, and it just quiets down for a while, and then I mean they're consistent and persistent. They just don't stop. So then it's not like they're going anywhere. Okay, so where we are is we're still waiting for this second reading. We don't know why it's not happened yet. Could you talk a little bit about where the German press is? It's probably quite similar to everywhere else, where there's a few brave journalists here and there trying to take a neutral stance on it, and then there's the right-wing press who are obviously our temporary bedfellows. What's the story there in Germany? How has the media treated this issue, and if you've noticed any differences between how German press and media has reacted compared to the UK? Because you're British, you're going to be able to have that perspective.
Well, I think it's similar in most respects. You've put it very well. There are some brave journalists, you could say, in various national newspapers who do write really good stuff. Really considered and well-informed articles, but they still tend to be a tiny minority. The overwhelming press coverage is uncritical. I think we would probably say just sort of cliches, really, repeating the human rights narrative.
Platitudes.
Platitudes. Thank you. And particularly in broadcasting. So there are always these heart-rending stories about some kid that there's three and knows that it's the other sex, and how that all goes. I think it's very similar. I mean, I've had some I had a pretty bad experience, because on the first reading of the self-ID law, I don't know if you know Dr. Porter. Well, anyway, one of our medical people who's on our side couldn't speak to the press, and they sent them to me. So I did some interviews with two TV broadcasters, one in central Germany. And, that was just amazing. I know that actually I shouldn't have done that, because that public broadcasting company is directed by a trans woman. But, I spoke to them for about 15 minutes, and they then broadcast about 30 seconds of me in which I actually sort of stumbled over my words twice and said something nonsensical. It was just obviously.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
awful.
really. Yeah, so sorry, I hope this noise isn't too bad. Sometimes I hear it. But...
no, it's all right. There's a bit of, as I was saying to you before, we're not going for a very slick production here, so don't worry. I just want to pick up on something that you said.
The right-wing press, there is a right-wing press, but it's not like in the UK, right? Because let's say, most of the conservative newspapers are not very critical either. Whereas if you look in the UK, you've got things like Daily Mail and Daily Telegraph. You kind of love it.
Telegraph, yeah. Sorry, just to pick up on something you said there, Dave, before I forget. Where would a person such as yourself then get news, gender critical news, apart from international sources? Like, do you have a big Substack type community? Or do you have where do people who care about this topic get their news and views?
Yeah, it's a good question, because actually, no, I don't. I would say that we don't have the same ecosphere, here as you've got in the English-speaking world. I get a lot of my information from Twitter, because that's where people are passing information around and referring to articles and so on. A lot of that is English-speaking, though. My contacts are, with the parents, with mainly feminist groups that I know, right, and have known for quite some time. So, and with people who are working in that area. I mean, like sort of medical specialists and so on. But it's not much more difficult to get. It's less. There's much less information here. Right.
But
Definitely.
You do have like a very strong sort of feminist movement in Germany. How has the feminist movement dealt with this? Have they been captured too, or?
Okay, yeah. I'm always wary of talking about the feminist movement, but and I think it'd be fair to say, yes, there is a strong feminist movement here, but a lot of the major feminist organizations have been captured. And the usual explanation is that's because they are so dependent on public funding, or they have become dependent on public funding, or they've accepted public funding over the years. Now, I used to be on a German district council. I know how these things work. That they appear to have been captured. So the feminist voices, there are many different critical feminist groups, but they tend to be autonomous, right? The Germans talk about autonom. They're autonomous groups, but the official feminist bodies, if you like, are
the professional feminists, let's say.
Yeah, they are, they're captured completely. They just repeat the same stuff. I mean, that's the thing about the, it's the same. I can't remember the fantastic word you use. It's just platitudes. It's just the same ones. It's like in the Soviet Union. Everyone says exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Like Stepford Wives.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'll just die if I don't get that recipe. They all just go around saying.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
There's years ago, one of an early sponsored project in the EU. So I look at all of the EU funding for this and the Council of Europe projects and obviously UN and stuff. And I remember coming across a workshop that was organized many moons ago in Ireland that was about it could have been called coming up with platitudes. And it was like, because I was like, I bet you they all use the same phrases so often, over and over and over again. I guess it's the same in German, but in English it's the same sentences repeated ad nauseum. And I was like, there must be a memo out there. So I went on this mission trying to find, like, where is the talking points memo with the list of 10 catchphrase sound bites. And I didn't find it, but I did come across like a project that was organized in the very early days, that it was like it was a platitudes, trans platitudes 101, and it was like, because I was like, maybe we can find a document that says, push the suicide gambit for kids. That works really well. But I didn't come across that, but I came across something much more.
I don't know whether this is organized or whether it's just a kind of a widespread kind of brain death, because that we've got another. I mean, at the moment, I don't know. Have you picked up on this? What's been happening in the last 2-3 weeks with the demonstrations against the far right AfD?
Oh yes, yeah, huge,
kind of huge thing. And as you know, I mean, you said, sometimes it's difficult for us because the AfD, is such a terrible bunch of people, but they actually understand this gender issue, which is just so frustrating, for us.
Same everywhere,
yeah, it's the same everywhere. So, but just on this thing about language, for example, I noticed in paper there's a jazz festival in Stuttgart which is quite well known, and apparently they've decided they don't want any AfD people to go there.
I saw this.
Which is up to them, right? But anyway, it was the reasoning that they gave which drove me a bit nuts, which is that jazz is, and these are the words, right? So is cosmopolitan, tolerant, open-minded, and it was a list of adjectives which you just find get repeated incessantly everywhere. To end all forms of discussion. I mean, we're talking about music. Music is not tolerant. Music is just music. Right? It's not tolerant. It can't be. It just hasn't got a mind. But it was just, we were talking about Stepford Wives, and it seems to be a kind of a mentality at the moment which just destroys all debate, all discussion by just listing, reciting a list of always the same adjectives which don't have any meaning anymore.
It's so bananas. It's just, it blows my mind every day. When you said at the beginning, it's recording the German Green Party, those 3 words just make me shudder. But obviously you've distanced yourself from the German Green Party in recent years. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, okay. I don't really know where to start. Yeah, I mean, I've been a German. In some ways, I kind of understand the mentality that we're up against quite well, because I think it's become much more extreme. But I think a lot of these queer arguments, I would have repeated them myself about 6-7 years ago. So I know where they're coming from, and I know that it's basically a position of ignorance. But so I was a member of the Greens, and I was a council member for many years. I was a member of the local party committee for many years. How do I get into this?
Just can you localize it a little bit?
Yeah, I localize it. Well,
whereabouts?
I'm living in southern Germany in a district called Reutlingen, which is near the university city of Tübingen.
Okay.
And as I say, I was on the district council for many years and in the party committee. Well, at one point, about 3 years ago, a woman who had also been on the party committee with me, a feminist, a very clear feminist, quite well known in Germany, Monika Bartz, I can say the name. She was Professor Monika Bartz, who had also been quite active in queer politics. But had been having obviously some kind of second thoughts, and she'd explained to me what was happening with the self-ID law, which the Green Party tried to bring into Parliament at the time when they were still in the opposition, right, before they became the government. And she explained to me what was going on, and I thought, I immediately understood what she was saying about the issues, women's rights, children, and so on. So I got involved with her, and we started talking to some Green politicians here locally, and I we supported. I don't know if you know Ava Ellington. She's another Green woman who wanted to bring in a resolution at the Green Party conference. So I gradually started getting involved in that, but we got nowhere at all. Nobody was interested in the party, in our critical perspective. But you want to get to my story, so I'll try and get there faster. Which is,
this is good context. So there were members of the Green Party in your region who are or like on what level that were opposed to this, or were trying to make arguments.
Very few. As I say, I was in contact with Monica Bartz, who's quite well known in Germany, because we'd been on the party committee together, and I was friendly with her, and I stayed friends with her. But she was the only person really here in the local area. But there were people in Germany altogether. So in the end, we managed to get together about 150 party members to try and get a resolution through the party conference. But that failed. They didn't even allow us to get the resolution onto the agenda. So what we actually experienced in the Green Party was that we were being blocked all the way at every single juncture. We were being blocked. We were being told, the usual thing, that we were using the wrong language. We weren't allowed to say certain things. It became extremely difficult to actually articulate any critical position at all, because any words you would use to articulate that position were considered to be, taboo. So it became very Orwellian very quickly, right? So that you couldn't actually say anything. But there were people, but it's a very tiny minority of members. So, and one day on the telephone, I was talking to my sister who lives in the UK, and I can't remember why. I must have been telling her this, and I suddenly had this spontaneous idea, because I'd been asked to stand for the local committee again, the local party committee, and I didn't really want to. I'd had enough of it, but I suddenly thought, oh, I could stand as a woman. Right, and my sister said, "Don't do that; they'll hate you if you do that." Right, and the reason why I could do that was that the party statutes, like the rules, the party rules, have got a rule which states that a woman is anybody who defines themselves as a woman, right? And that's important in the party, because the party works strictly on a quota basis. So, for example, the party committee has to be made up 50-50 of men and women, right? So that each post is voted for separately. That's true of the German parliament as well. So I said to the people, in the party, okay, I'll stand for the party committee, without telling them what I was actually going to do, which was on the evening of the election, the first post to be voted on was a woman's position, because it's always in the Green Party, the first position always goes to the woman, or it has to be a woman who takes it.
So, chivalrous.
Huh? Yes, yeah, right. So anyway, I spontaneously, I hope I'm not doing this too quickly, but anyway, I spontaneously said, yes, I'm going to be. I want to be. I'm standing for this position, which caused, in this party meeting.
Okay, so hold on. Sorry, you're saying I'm standing for this position as a woman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I didn't.
Sorry, David, this was 2021.
Only women were allowed to stand for this position.
Yeah.
Right? It was a position that was
okay. And David, this was 2021, was it? Or what year was it?
This is September 21. Yeah.
Okay, it's also recent. God. Okay, go ahead. So you're like, I'm standing in this woman's.
Yeah. So I did this spontaneously. I'd actually prepared some info material, but at this moment, I stood in front of the 60-odd people who were at this meeting and said, I'm gonna stand for this position, because they wouldn't. And then, of course, there was a bit of astonishment, and people said, because they know me, right?
Hold on. So back up just a sec. So you said, I'm going to stand for this position because, and you had a smirk on your face, and you were like, it was like, sort of, look how ridiculous this all is, or how sincere did you pretend to be?
No, I mean, I didn't at that moment. I didn't have a smirk on my face at that moment. I tried to be serious. Right? So at that point, so I was trying to explain how I did that. So I tried to be serious. I didn't say any more than that. And then, of course, there was bafflement and astonishment, and I was asked then by some of the more queer people there, somebody said, "Oh, you're transitioning. How far are you on your transition?" And I said, I'm not actually transitioning. I insisted that I was simply referred to the sentence in the rules which said a woman is someone who defines themselves as a woman. I said, I'm not identifying as anything. I simply define myself today as a woman. No more than that. Okay, no more than that. I'm not doing any. So I simply refused to get involved in this discussion about how far along my route to transition I was, because it's just complete nonsense, right? So they were obviously baffled and very skeptical, but there was a sort of hesitancy, and then the chair of the meeting, who, and that's another complicating factor, happened to be my employer at the time because I was working for the party, decided, okay, let him do it. He can be the candidate. So what that meant
even on the
was,
joke style, or like what
I
way can
think
you
at that
possibly?
moment, because they realized they'd been caught, right? So that's why I didn't want to. I did this a bit secretly. I didn't inform anybody in advance, because I knew that if I said this is my idea, they would have come up with some strategy. But they would have been taken on the hop. So they had to go along with it, because I was just simply citing the party rules to them. I define myself as a woman. What can they do? They can't. They had to make a decision on the spot, so they decided, okay, let him do it, right? So then I was able to briefly, what you normally do in these elections is you normally just say a few words about yourself. It's not going to be a huge speech because it's only for the committee, but so you can maybe talk for 3, 4, 5 minutes and say who you are and why you want to be on the committee. So that was my opportunity to say, well, you all know me very well, but I am now defined as myself as a woman, and my wife didn't realize that she was a lesbian when she married me, but now she's quite happy to. Now she realizes she is a lesbian. And in this, I can't remember my exact words actually, but in this speech, I know I got a few laughs actually, because I think it was quite funny. And but I tried to make it obvious how problematic this entire
Like
thing
you
was.
were making a point as opposed
Yeah,
to.
yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that was, I wasn't smirking and laughing, but it was intended to be sort of humorous, but serious. So and trying to pointing out the implications, and the implications, particularly for the party, meant that a man was going to take, or could have taken, a woman's place.
And so would it be fair to say then that your main hook was that look, how can you use this gender equality instrument?
Well, my main thing, I think, was the two different things for me. One is, I've listened to, the feminist arguments I was familiar with, I think, and they were correct. That this is a way in which men can enter women's spaces illegitimately. So I really am fully accept and think this argument is correct. I suppose more deep down, though, my personal objection to the whole thing is it's just because it's, I'm not allowed to swear here, am I? Just fucking crazy. It's just completely,
crazy.
it's just so nutty. And I also think that, that's probably more my personal motivation, because I think it's so Orwellian. If a party can say this to me and expect me to believe it, then I think it's totalitarian. I mean, that's my deepest feeling about it, to be honest. I just think, it's this gaslighting argument. And
I think that as well, like there were so many reasons why this is wrong and bad, but sometimes I think for me also deep down, it's just the nuttiness of it. Like it's the untruthfulness of it as well. Is the thing that really gets up my ass. Like how, you're supposed to call out lies. And okay, some lies are maybe, you tell your kids white lies sometimes that, like, I used to tell my kids when they'd hear the ice cream van, I would go, "Oh, there's the broccoli van," so that they wouldn't beg me to go get ice cream. Like that's an acceptable lie, but that upturns everyone's reality. Like sometimes I just shake my head and say, no, it just can't fucking, whatever the other arguments are, it cannot be let.
I agree. That's exactly my feeling. I mean, as I say, I'm fully on board with the feminist arguments, and obviously I do this stuff now, working for children and families, and that's extremely important. And still, the basic feeling is it's just this rejection of reality, this denial of reality, which is just so appalling. And I mean, actually, one of the things that piqued me was briefly before I did this thing was, can I mention briefly this Green MP?
Yes, please do. No discussion on German trans madness would be complete without a mention of this AGP MP. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. So anyway, this AGP MP was before the last election was in the State Assembly in Bavaria, and he has been elected there as a man. And then I came across this YouTube video, the Green Party YouTube video, in when he outed himself as a woman to the party grouping in the State Assembly, right? So they actually had this on film. And when I saw this guy, the Green MP, goes in and everybody congratulated him that he was now a woman. And I realized, I knew in that moment, that if I had been a member of that parliamentary group, I would in that moment have objected. I would have said, look, dear Marcus or dear Tessicus, I don't mind calling you that name. This is, you can't just come in here and expect everybody just to accept this. Sorry, I would not have gone along with it. And I realized that everybody else in this group, in this party grouping, had gone along with it, and it just really got up my nose. I just thought this is just it's not okay.
Are you sure you wouldn't have been the same as them?
I know I would not. I know I would not. I would not have gone along with it. I'm not. I don't do this every day. I'm not the sort of person who constantly causes trouble. But like it's been 2 or 3 times in my life when I've done this, and I know that's just not for me. It's just I would not have accepted that.
Sometimes I think we're going to discover a biological basis for TERFness, that all of those who just can't who can't handle the lies, they're going to figure out that there's something in your synapses or your prefrontal cortex that predisposes you to just like I can't swallow it, I can't do it. No,
I can't do that. Have you seen that? Oh no, that'd be going off into a tangent. I mean, I understand this psychological situation. I mean, there are positions where maybe you would go along because it would just be far too threatening not to. But I mean,
I even think like
in a party group of say 20, 30, 40 Green members. Well, I don't give a toss what they think. I mean, I'm not going to go along with that. If it was like the the KGB and they were going to torture me or something, I might think otherwise. It's not the case, is it?
Yeah, and sometimes I think like I'd rather work in a factory nights gutting fish. I'll lose my job for this. I don't care,
Yeah.
Let me just come back a bit to this Tessa character. Is there any way you can get me that video of him outing himself in front of all these people, or is that would it be too difficult to dig that up?
No, there's a YouTube video.
Really? So if I search,
I can send you a link. I've got your email. I can send you a link. I'll look.
Yes, please. I would like to see that.
Yeah.
It should be part of the future exhibit when we study this.
Anyway,
okay, there's lots of videos of him on YouTube.
Yeah, some of them quite absurd. Yes.
Okay, so where shall we go then? So what happened then afterwards? So I understand your motivations for doing this. Your employer, the head said, okay, go ahead, let him do it. And then what happened?
Okay, so there was a vote, and I didn't get elected. I think 3 people voted for me, which was not a problem. So my argument was simply they had allowed me to stand as a woman. In fact, I'd won this point in a way.
Yeah.
Anyway, what happened after that was there was discussion, obviously, Someone was going to write a press release about the meeting, which is usual, okay, for the local press. And they'd asked me, do we have to talk about this? And I said, no. I mean, I was very generous at that time. I said, no, you don't have to. You don't have to write that down, but you should mention that the issue trans was discussed. Okay, that's what I wanted to see. Nothing more than that.
David, were you still trying to salvage your place in the party?
No, I wasn't really bothered one way or the other.
Yeah, I remember that from our discussion. You were saying that you, for that particular reason, you were out, or there was other stuff going on. I mean, you don't have to go into.
Yeah, this is what happened. Why I finally left is because then a press release was sent out and published, and there was absolutely no mention in it of the trans issue at all, right? So, and then I said to the party people that this was fake news, that they had ignored the most interesting aspects of the entire evening, which was me, because the rest of it was totally tedious. It was just about finances. So I was annoyed about that, and through various channels, another group of feminists who kind of cottoned onto this asked me whether I'd be interested in publishing it myself via, I don't know, do you know the German magazine Emma, which is the big, okay, so the people who had contacts there, and they said, would you want to write it about it yourself? And I thought, yes, I do, because I've tried, in this party to address this issue. We've been blocked everywhere. And even my rather reasonable request that they should at least be mentioned in the press release that the trans issue was discussed, and no more than that, not even that was respected. So it was just completely ignored. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to write the article. So I wrote down this story, and they published it more or less word for word in Emma magazine. And then what happened was, of course, that I got lots and lots of phone calls from the press, from the national press, who were interested in this story. And I didn't talk to all of them. For example, I was pursued for about 2 weeks by Bild-Zeitung, which is like the German big tabloid newspaper.
Like right-wing, sort of, or? Like
the Sun.
Okay.
But I didn't want to talk to them at the time. But anyway, so that kind of was briefly a bit of a kind of big story. That newspaper published the story anyway. And so this led to growing tension between me and the party, because I had a job at that time with the party. And to cut a long story short, I was kicked out of my job, not out of the party, but of my job. And then I wrote a second story for Emma, which kind of annoyed them even more. But I was still a party member. It's very difficult to get somebody out of a political party in Germany. It's highly regulated by law who can be a member, and it's very, very difficult to get rid of somebody. So I could have stayed in the party, but there were, I was kind of fed up with it. And to be honest, there are a number of other political issues where I realized I was, really not really agreeing anymore. Not the way the Green Party had developed. So, yeah, I decided to leave.
Yeah, and so, sorry, I didn't quite catch that. At what point did your employment get terminated? Did your contract run out?
It went quite quickly, because this thing, my first story what I did was in September, I think 2021, and then it got into the press in sort of 3-4 weeks after that, and then I got fired, right, because I talked to the press.
And that was the rule that you had broken, and it wasn't about your beliefs.
That's not really a rule. There was no rule for it. I was fired on no grounds, and this was because German employment law allows let's put it away. I was working for the MP. The MP had 3-4 employees, and if you've got less than 10 employees in Germany, you can fire people for no reason. Oh. So you didn't have to state a reason. And when the MP was contacted by the press to inquire, have you chucked this guy out because of his political opinions? She simply said, no, that's not the reason. I didn't give any reason.
No way.
So,
and you'd have no recourse then? There's nothing you can do about that?
No,
because
there was nothing I could do about that. Okay. There was nothing. I mean, I got quite generous. I mean, generous. I don't suppose, I was paid for another 3 months, but it's not extremely generous. But
we can say with close to 100% certainty. Sorry?
There's nothing I could do about it.
But can we say that we're certain that the reason that they let you go was for that?
Well, there's no other reason. I mean, absolutely. That's obviously the reason. It was the reason, but they weren't going to say that.
Okay, but it's not like the kind of thing that as MP's assistants get fired all the time, and it's not that. You would have, there was a job for you there.
Oh, absolutely.
You had become too inconvenient, and
they were extremely annoyed. I mean, I know it's a bit difficult to talk about that. I mean, I'm actually, as an assistant, I actually was party to all the email correspondence. So I know the people higher up in the party who were basically saying he's got to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can't use this as evidence, and it wouldn't make any difference because actually they're entirely entitled to fire me on no grounds. The law allows for this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So,
that's crazy. Wow.
That.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much for sharing that again. For those who don't know, Emma is it's a feminist publication. It's a long-running feminist publication in Germany, and it's gender critical, thankfully. Is that more or less correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The editors are still resisting
That's the kind of difference to Germany. In other countries, the publisher, Alice Schwarzer, is a really big name in Germany, but she is the very well-known feminist in Germany, but basically the only one, whereas in the UK there's more names. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so we've covered where we are with the German law. I have one last question, and it's maybe a bit of a weird question, but I have noticed that you have a lot of sex shops and much more acceptance, maybe public acceptance of kink and sexuality, maybe generally in Germany. So I always wonder, to what do you think? This may be the weirdest question ever, but does it have an effect on the likelihood of men with paraphilic fetishism? As we were talking about earlier, that trans is not one thing, but there is a huge contingent of trans-identifying people who are like Ganser or whatever his name is, are autogynephiles. Do you think that Germany's, let's say, libertine approach to sex and sexuality might influence the number of autogynephiles you might have on the streets in the future? Or are legal changes going to have not really any great effect compared to what's already sort of accepted in German society, if you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, it's a good. I really don't know whether that will become more apparent or not. I mean, I think the key thing is I think Germany sort of has a reputation. And Germans also see themselves as being extremely regulated and rule-based, and kind of they think of themselves as being conservative, and a bit, like this old idea of German sort of Prussian or even Nazi, But in reality, it's quite different because Germany is an extremely libertarian country. It's the one country in the whole world where there is no upper speed limit on the motorway. We have a totally unregulated sex industry. We've got, it's kind of weird. It's extremely libertarian, this country. And I think it's partly to do, I mean, this is pure speculation. I think it's partly to do with the whole psychosis the country has about the Nazi past, and trying to come to terms with this. And
sorry to interrupt, but even before all of that, you had like Magnus Hirschfeld or whatever. You had all these the most liberal, like the most progressive sexologists and laws about homosexuality in the world were in Germany.
Yeah, that's true. So whether that's, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I don't know, but there is definitely this strand in German society, and one, of course, really important, and you've said it yourself, is it finds expression to some extent in the relative political strength of the German Green Party, which is obviously much more politically successful than most Green parties in Europe. Yeah, there may be comparable ones, but
And why do you think that is? Is that
Hmm?
because of the psychosis? Why is the Green Party more successful in Germany? Is that because of this psychosis you mentioned, do you think? Or, I mean, it's not environmentalism. It's
No, it's
not.
not environmentalism. No. Um, yeah, this was a whole, be a whole program, wouldn't it? Friends of my age, people who are slightly too young to have been 1968ers, but who are around, would always sort of regard 1968 and the whole changes of those period at times as being something quintessentially German, right? So I point out that, well, actually not, because it was happening in other Western countries in pretty much the same way. But
French
the
people
Germans,
think it's quintessentially French also.
maybe, but they would always refer to the Nazi past and how important it has been to to break away from,
To overcorrect to the point where you.
to overcorrect. Yeah, maybe that's it. I mean, yeah, I can't really answer the question as to why. I mean, one reason compared to the UK is obviously the electoral system is very different, but of course that applies to other European countries where the Green Party it hasn't become so much a part of the establishment, and it really is the establishment here. I think that's a bit controversial, but the idea of the march through the institutions here is completely 100% successful. So I could talk a lot about that, how the institutions have been completely captured. But ultimately, I can't give you an explanation as to why my perception that Germany, that it's much, it's very extreme here. Really.
The name of the German equivalent to Stonewall is the Christopher Street people, or what's the German Stonewall?
I actually can't even tell you the name because it doesn't have the same kind of public profile as Stonewall does in the UK. There is something called LGB something or other. What you're thinking of is the Christmas Street Day parades, which are just, as far as I understand it, they're just, they're people who organise these CSD parades. But
Okay.
I mean, actually, in some ways, they don't. There are a lot of different trans and LGBTQ organisations. There's nothing with quite the same public profile as Stonewall.
Okay.
In the UK.
Oh, I thought the Christopher Street Day was like some sort of NGO that was influential, but no, it's just the parade. They're the
I think
parade.
it is. I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you don't have an equivalent then to also do you have an equivalent to TENI in Ireland, like the trans specific NGO that gets government funding and it's in all the consultations, or is it spread throughout the country and too dispersed?
There are, I think it's probably telling that I'm not very good at the names. So there are, I have the impression that there's a great array of different organizations, but, trans organizations, trans allied organizations, they, sort of the mainstream LGBTQ stuff. But yeah, I think it's a larger number of organizations because none of these have the same kind of name recognition as Stonewall does. Right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Ireland, I suppose, is so small that we have like the main ones and they're heavily publicly subsidized. The UK.
One of the reasons why we have got, we've got the Green Party. The Green Party, I think possibly that may be a difference. The Green Party is the mouthpiece for this organization, and they are in Parliament and they're extremely vocal. We've got a queer spokesman for the Green Party in the government who's pushing this stuff, and I think they are the people who sort of take this role in Germany.
Wow, the Green Party is the biggest queer advocacy group.
Yeah.
Lobbying itself. Okay, brilliant. That sounds like a fucking nightmare.
I mean, another thing is, just very briefly, I don't know if you've probably got onto this thing, you realise that the Linkspartei, the left party, there's been a split with this Sarah Wagenknecht, who's set up her own party. But one of the reasons for the split is because the left party has basically become a kind of a copy of the Greens, so they do exactly the same thing. And that wasn't to the liking of all the members. But
and so the split off is to become less like the Greens or more like the Greens?
Well, the people who have left the Linkspartei kind of they're left, they're very left, but they're also woke critical. They don't want to go this way, so that's kind of interesting.
Good, no? That's good and good development.
I think it's good. I think that's a really interesting development. Yeah, they are. Yeah, that's right. And
what do they call themselves?
They're explicitly against self-ID. Well, I mean, it's been led, the split, by somebody called Sarah Wagenknecht. She's very, very well known in Germany. She's originally a Marxist, and they've decided, for better or worse, they've decided to, for the time being, to call this new party the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, because of her name recognition. Right? So everybody in Germany knows her. But anyway, that's.
Have you considered getting involved with them, or your days of?
Yeah, because I mean, funny enough, my local left party MP, who's a relatively young woman, compared to me anyway, is part of this new grouping. So I think that's quite interesting. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Well, that's a very positive note upon which to end the
interview, sure.
David.
That's good.
Thanks. I'm glad we got that bit in at the end. I had no idea that was happening. That's amazing. That's what we need everywhere.
I mean, that's it's an interesting development. Of course, Sarah Wagenknecht is, of course, subject to the usual, bullshit criticism.
Of course. But I mean, well, let's see what happens. But we're also desperate for somebody who's not like red meat conservative, who's saying the same things that we are.
That's right.
So hopefully it draws lots of people out and she gets lots of support. Will you keep me updated on any developments there so we can, or maybe I guess you tweet about this stuff. I can just retweet you. I'm taking a Twitter break at the moment because Twitter madness.
Sure, I'll give you some info. Yeah, of course I can keep you up to date. There's lots of interesting developments here. Yeah, I mean, generally, there's a sort of a, like a countercurrent to it. It's not as strong as the main direction, but there are things happening. Yeah.
They can't discredit us all. They'll discredit the first ones to put their heads above the parapet, but they'd be very tired out trying to discredit absolutely everyone. So I think that's just that they're going to tire themselves out. That's my hope. They can't call us all. I mean, they will try, but there's more. I truly believe there are more of us than there are of them. So anyway, we've run way over time, David. Any last words? Anything to promote?
No. I mean, I could talk for hours, and it's really nice that you gave me the opportunity. I also thank you because I've also now been able to talk in English. I'm surprised actually how difficult I find it talking English.
Oh, really?
I normally do this stuff in German. So that was nice,
You have to put all your verbs closer to the start of the sentence. It's very like I've heard this before. Maybe this is a cliche and maybe it's also very dumb, but I've heard that one of the reasons why German and Dutch people or societies are so organized is because you have to know the end of your sentence before you start saying it.
That's a good idea.
And I wonder because French is a very, so I speak French because I live in Brussels. French is a very lyrical sort of language where you can just go on and on and on and on, and you don't have to have any destination. And not that French society isn't very well organized, but it's much more sort of romantic, kind of less business. I don't know. That's a
nice thought. I've never heard that one before, but that's a good idea. Try it out. Yeah. No, thanks. Okay. I can't think of anything else to say right now. But
okay, cool. Well, I'll be pleased to talk to you again in the future. Thank you so much for all of your great insights and explainers.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the time as well. So, look forward to talking to you again sometime.
If you like my work, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to peaked.substack.com and taking out a paid subscription.